Okay, let's just jump right in. I am looking at a price tag that honestly feels like a typo. $930 for one cable. I mean, I try to be open-minded about tech, but almost a grand for an HDMI cord? You have to explain this to me because right now it just feels like snake oil.
Well, yeah, it definitely looks aggressive if you're comparing it to, the $5 cable you grab at the checkout.
Hmm.
But we aren't talking about hooking up a gaming console in the den. This is the PureLink EZH8-050-DT. And really calling it a cable is kind of selling it short. Think of it more as a piece of active infrastructure.
Active infrastructure just looks like a very long wire. What makes this so essential for what they call critical installations?
It's what's inside. You're not paying for copper here, you're paying for glass. This is an HDMI 2.1 over detachable fiber cable.
Whoa, hold on. Fiber optics for a TV signal? That sounds like
Right.
massive overkill. We've been using copper HDMI for, what, over a decade? It works fine? Why bring glass into it?
Physics. It's all about the physics of distance. Copper's great for 6, maybe 10 feet behind your desk, but this is a 50-meter run. That's over 160 feet. When you try to push the kind of bandwidth we need today over that much copper, the signal just it hits a cliff. It degrades, you get sparkles, or the screen just goes black.
So it's purely a bandwidth issue.
Exactly. We're talking about a 48 gigabit per second pipeline here. To get a raw, totally uncompressed 8K signal from point A to point B without dropping a single packet. Copper can't do it at that length. Not without these bulky signal boosters that add lag.
Yeah.
This cable basically converts the signal to light, shoots it down the glass, and converts it back instantly.
Okay, I can see that. So if I'm running like a huge screen in a stadium or a medical display where I absolutely can't have fuzzy text or artifacts.
That's the use case.
Mhm.
And it keeps the full 4.4.4 color space. Most long cables compress the color data to save bandwidth, which is why text can look a little washed out. This keeps it bit perfect.
Mhm.
Plus, for gamers or, high frame rate video, it can handle 4K at 120 hertz without breaking a sweat.
Okay, fair enough on the specs. But that part number, EZH8-050-DT. What's the DT about?
Ah, that stands for detachable. And if you've ever actually had to install a cable through a wall, this is probably the most important feature.
Detachable. Why? Just for storage.
No. Picture this. You've spent an hour pulling 50 meters of cable through a ceiling conduit. You get to the end, but the opening is narrow. A normal HDMI head is blocky and wide. It won't fit. You're just stuck.
Oh, I have absolutely been there. You end up trying to tape it and grease it and just pray you don't snap the connector off while you're pilling.
Right. With this, the HDMI heads on both ends, the transmitter and receiver, they just pop right off. So you're left with just the slim fiber cable itself. You pull that thin little thread through the conduit, easy, and then you just snap the HDMI heads back on.
Okay, I have to admit that's a brilliant solution to a very real headache. It turns a nightmare installation into a sure thing. But what about fragility? I always thought if you bend fiber, it just snaps, right?
That's the old reputation. This stuff has an ultra-small bending radius, about 45 millimeters.
Mhm.
It's surprisingly flexible. And here's the other thing that drives installers crazy. Power. Usually, active fiber cables like this need a separate little USB power brick plugged into the wall to run the converters.
Which is such a pain. You never have a spare outlet behind a professionally mounted TV.
Precisely. This one is fully plug and play. It draws the tiny bit of power it needs directly from the HDMI port itself. No external power needed.
That's actually really clever. One less point of failure.
And it handles the whole digital handshake, the e-deal automatically. You know how sometimes you plug a laptop into a projector and they just refuse to talk to each other?
The dreaded no signal blue screen.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. This cable just sorts all that out, so the source knows exactly what the display can handle. It also supports all the modern stuff like dynamic HDR and ERC for high-end audio.
So it's basically an invisible zero latency pipe that makes sure everything just works.
And it's even backward compatible with older HDMI standards. The whole point is you install it and you never have to think about it again.
I suppose that's the goal of good infrastructure, isn't it? To be completely boring and reliable. Well, for the professionals listening who might actually need this, there is a 5% off code at checkout. Might take a little sting out of that price tag. Plus, there's a 3-year warranty.
Every little bit helps when you're outfitting an entire conference center or something.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We live in this world that's obsessed with going wireless, right? Wi-Fi, casting, everything's in the cloud. But isn't it interesting that when we need the absolute highest fidelity, the peak of visual quality, we still have to rely on a physical $900 thread of glass?
It really shows you that while the cloud feels wireless, The pipes that actually feed it are very, very physical.
Something to think about next time you see a crystal clear image on a massive screen. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.